Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we explore the lived experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. It's an opportunity for us to hear and to understand what it is that gives them their sense of identity and their sense of belonging. And I say this every week, and I have never been proved otherwise. I say I've got an extra special guest this week. And our guest this week is Barbara Adewumi. And Barbara is from the University of Kent, where she is the BME Office Staff Network co-chair. And she's also works in Partnership Development Office as a I think I've got that wrong now. Postdoctoral research associate. I think she's got a promotion since then. So, and I thought I'd changed it. Apologies, Barbara.
No.
Um, but she'll tell us about her meteoric rise anyhow. So, Barbara, I want to say a big thank you for being our guest this week. It's been amazing and I know that I'm going to kick off with our first question, which is, can you tell me a little bit about what it was that gave you your sense of identity and your sense of belonging as you were growing up?
Oh, hello, Wayne, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me for this event today on belonging. Okay, so to gain my understanding of identity, I would say is I was fortunate enough as a baby at 18 months old to actually go back to my parents' country of origin, which is Trinidad and Tobago. My mum particularly found it difficult during the 1960s to bring up a young child in the cold, in terrible living conditions. The accommodation wasn't great back then for the Windrush generation, as you know. And
Mm,
she decided it was too cold and time to send her back home. So that's what I did. I went to Trinidad and I lived there for many years, and I kind of came back just before I went into secondary education.
mhm,
And so during that time of being in Trinidad, I was surrounded by my food, my culture. I love calypso. I love the satirical lyrics of calypso. I love carnival. I
mhm,
grew up amongst just going to the beach, and it was a regular thing for me. And also importantly, seeing people in positions of power that looks like me, that looks like my mom and my dad, and just, yeah, just being myself. It didn't occur to me about those sorts of things about needing to know your identity, needing to know your heritage, because I was living in it at the time. So it's only when I then came to England, back in the 70s, that I realized, okay, things are different here. And
mm.
I grew up from then on in Tottenham, in the city, London, Tottenham.
Right. You've gone from the beach side to broad. I'm not going to say.
Well,
Oh,
I was on the quieter side of Tottenham, I have to say, but
okay.
did have to go through places like Broadwater Farm in order to get to school. And I
Mhm,
went to a local comprehensive, but it was a Roman Catholic school, a
mhm.
secondary school that I went to.
So that in what you just said in terms of your um upbringing in the Caribbean and having those people who look like you in your everyday vicinity, it was the norm.
Yes.
What was it like then for you when you came back, kind of like um going into secondary school? How did that make you feel?
I felt very displaced, to be honest with you. Straight away, I noticed that all my teachers were white. That was a complete change for me.
Mhm,
And I also noticed that the majority, if not all, of the Black children were in one class or two
mm,
classes, split up between two classes. So was that a deliberate thing? I don't know. But these sorts of things were running through my mind. And it was interesting because I came from Trinidad with quite good grades because it's very competitive education in Trinidad, actually.
yeah,
And they always want you to be a step ahead. It's very, very competitive. So when I got there, I found that I was in a classroom with very mixed abilities, and I was going up and down what we used to call streams
Hmm.
in classes in those days. They used to put you in a lower stream or a middle stream or an upper stream, and they couldn't seem to kind of pinpoint where I should be. So they were very confused as to how come this girl knows so much at this
Yeah.
age compared to the
Hmm.
rest of the black children in the classroom who are from Tottenham. You see what I mean? So
Yeah.
they were moving me up and down and trying to get a sense of my abilities and capabilities. Yeah. So I found it to be very disjointed, and I found to be very displaced during that time. Mm.
So a quick question, based on the fact that it sounded like when you were in Trinidad, because of the whole environment, school was competitive, but you enjoyed that competitive nature. Did coming into Tottenham and going into schooling there, did that kind of like not put you off school, but make you think, well, is this worthwhile, this process that we're going through in this environment that I'm in now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, I suddenly fell into, or gradually fell into, their sort of way of thinking,
Hmm.
unfortunately. I became less competitive. I became disappointed, I suppose, by the lack of attention that teachers were providing in the classroom. The disruptiveness in the classroom kind of put me off from concentrating. So I felt I felt it was really difficult to maintain the standards and the discipline that was in Trinidad's education. I felt the teachers just didn't care about us and were just leaving us to our own devices, and we would just find our way somehow through secondary education.
And was there were there no role models in the school or community people who could say, you know what, we can see you got talent or anything? Did you have any role models as such
To
during
be
that
honest with
time?
you, no, no role models in my secondary education, I have to say. It was make it your own. And I pretty much relied on my parents to encourage me. And when I was in fifth form, that's what you
Mhm.
used to call it back then,
Yeah.
I kind of hung around students who had aspirations,
Mhm.
and they weren't necessarily black. They were Chinese, Asian, a couple of white students who were thinking about their careers.
Mhm.
And yeah, I kind of hung around with them for a bit in order to kind of stay focused on my grades and
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
How did that come across? I'm gonna, because I know how young children are. If they see you're not kind of like going along with your peers, as it were,
Mm.
was there any backlash that you experienced? Did people say, well, oh, you're just following them or anything like that?
Well,
Or,
the thing is that I only kind of went with them in the classroom, but outside of the
okay.
classroom, I then hung out with my with my peers. Yeah,
So
I
you were
then hung out
switching. You learned how to switch to you.
Switch. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. This is a skill I have to say that I developed very early on.
Hmm.
Yes. Mm.
Okay. Okay. So what did you want to do? Kind of like you're going through school, what were your aspirations?
Okay. Yeah. I was really interested in things like marketing, and I was quite sociable, and I felt that I could talk to people and kind of have persuasive skills to get them to buy something, to buy a product or buy a service. So one day I went to my careers advisor, as you do, when you get to fifth form and you have to start thinking about your careers and so on. And I had a chat with him and I said, you know what, I would really like to go into PR, public relations. And his face just was, how do you even know what public relations is?
Hmm.
Let me advise you, based on your grades and based on your abilities, I think you'd be best to be a hairdresser, not go into public relations.
So just 1 second now.
Mm.
Did you have some fancy hairstyle? Were you going? What was it? Which kind of like said to him, "Oh, you'll be a good hairdresser, but not anything else."
Mm. Actually, in those days, my hair was really long, thick, and curly.
No, I
Different styles. But I don't think that was the reason why he said that. I think he probably said that to many of the black girls that were there,
Mm,
to be honest with you.
mhm.
and I just think it was a lazy way of thinking
Hmm.
rather than asking me more questions about why and how would you be able to do it and have a proper conversation. He just completely made me feel deflated and made me feel that small. So I
Hmm.
came out of there feeling very, very disappointed in that conversation.
Hmm.
Mm.
So what did you do? Did you stay at that school? Did you move to another school? Did you say, well, let me show
Yes,
you?
yes. I had some issues with the sixth form
Hmm.
teachers, and
Hmm.
they decided that they didn't want me to stay on. And I found that to be a pattern with many of the black students who wanted to stay on to do A levels at that secondary school, that they didn't want us to stay on. And so they said, we don't think that you have the ability to do A levels, Barbara. So find yourself another way. So I decided, okay, I would go to further education college. So I did, and I did three A levels and I got my A levels. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
That's fantastic. So um, it just bothers me that within the school system there was no, from the careers advisors to the sixth form tutors, they didn't see any value in what you could contribute.
No, no. And I kept saying in my mind, God, I wish I was back in Trinidad. It would be so different. Yeah, this experience, I did not enjoy secondary school, not at all.
Mm.
I don't have very much fond memories of it. And I couldn't point to one teacher that gave me a micro affirmation or encouraged me. But college was different. It was.
Okay, tell us about that difference then. What was it that happened in college which kind of like helped you to kind of like regain your passion, as it were?
Mm. Well, there was one teacher who was a sociologist, and I chose sociology A level,
Hmm.
and she was fantastic. She just had a great way of teaching, and she took me aside and she said, "You know what, Barbara, you have the capability to get an A in sociology." And this
Wow.
is what, yeah, and that's what she said. And she said, "This is what you're going to do for me. You're going to produce a draft essay for me every 2 weeks." I said, "What? I haven't got time for that. I have A levels to do." She said, "No, you can do it. If you want to get an A in this, and I feel that you can, let's work on this." And she was absolutely right. I aced that exam.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, I've got goosebumps going down my back because that's kind of inspirational teacher that you want.
Yeah. Imagine if I
Mhm.
had that in secondary school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, to see the potential. And I always give the analogy of a seed. The seed has the potential, but based on which soil it's placed in will determine whether or not that seed is able to flourish, right? So you
Yeah.
were placed in that, in the FE, it gave you that aspirations and the encouragement. To tell us what then happened in terms of having got that A, how did you feel? I'm sure elated, but
Well, actually, when I got my results of my A levels, that's actually in Trinidad. Surprise, surprise.
were you at Carnival?
No, no, no. It was just after exams, like three
Yeah,
days after the final exams.
yeah,
Just got on a plane and just went home to
yeah,
relax. Yes. So after that, then obviously I had applied to go to university.
yeah.
Um, and I saw this really great course that was at Middlesex University called
Hmm.
sociology. It was a joint degree, bachelor's, a joint degree in sociology and third world studies. That's what they called it back then. Sorry,
Mm.
everyone, but that's what it was called back then, third world studies. Um, and it was a great degree that I did. And yeah, I think I think I learned a lot about myself during that degree. Because you get to that point where you can pick your own modules. You've done
Yeah.
all the core stuff, and then you can pick your own modules. That's when I really, really started to excel in my critical thinking and critical consciousness, and went into things like Pan-Africanism and yeah, things that related to race and identity. It was great. Yeah, really great opportunity. I got to travel to Tunisia
Hmm.
for a week on that degree and see what it's like to be in Africa, you know.
Hmm.
And it was great, a great experience.
So how do you think that shaped kind of like your identity and your sense of belonging then? Because if I pull it back to that question about that sense of belonging and identity, what changed during that degree, would you
Yeah.
say?
I would say the one thing that changed in me as a Black Caribbean woman, because I had very strong ties with Trinidad, as you can understand. I kept going back home, you know, I
Hmm.
was brought up there when I was young. So I'd say the main thing was confidence in myself of who I am in
Hmm.
this country of Britain.
Hmm.
Because in Britain, they marginalize you, they stereotype you. You know, I've been through all of that during my education, where I've carried that weight, which got heavier, which seemed to got heavier and heavier until I got into my degree and found myself and my confidence as a woman, as a Black Caribbean woman, and felt, okay, I can do this and I could, and I really love to learn and I really wanted to know more about things like inequality. Why is there so much inequality in the world? Because I also did geography A level, which kind
Hmm.
of sparked that interest in me about when we learnt about Brazil and how many African slaves went to Brazil, for example, and the poverty between the north and the south, you know, the favelas and compared to the capital. So this kind of started to increase my curiosity about why is the world so unequal.
So it enabled you to broaden your horizons and to see and to actually start seeing those inequalities which existed or do exist.
Yeah.
So, as you said, it sounded as though your intention was do your degree. And were you heading back to Trinidad? What was the plan?
Surprise, surprise. Yes, that was the plan. I wanted desperately to go back to Trinidad. My
Hmm.
two sisters were there at the time, so the plan was to go and live with them. They have loads of contacts. It's a small island, so everybody knows each other, so they're bound to find me something really, really good.
Yeah,
And I had this aspiration to join CARICOM, which is
yeah.
the Caribbean Committee, which is like the old EEC. Um,
Hmm.
and the idea there was to provide regeneration in urban areas of the Caribbean and different islands. I just didn't want to focus on Trinidad. So I had all these great ideas about what I wanted to do with my degree. However, well, I say however, but it is a fantastic ending. That degree. I met my husband in the third year of my
Okay.
degree. Yeah, Mr. Adewumi. And and the rest is history. I actually
Okay.
decided to stay. To
Yeah.
stay. Yeah.
Fantastic. I knew it might, and I'll say no more. But fantastic. Um, but so what having met Mr. Adewumi, what was the encouragement that Mr. other than to stay with him, you
Mm,
already had your aspirations. What was his contribution? How did the two of you see your futures together, as it were?
mm. Yes, it was an interesting conversation because I told him about my aspirations and what I wanted to do. And he says, no, you're not going back to Trinidad, you're staying with me. On the provision, on the condition that I do a master's.
Hmm.
Yeah, that I do a master's here because he said a first degree won't get you to places that you want to go in
Yeah.
Britain. So do a master's. And so I decided to do that. I took out a bank loan in those days, you know,
Hmm.
took out a
Hmm.
bank loan. And I remember the bank manager was laughing at me saying, oh, you just want a trip to the Caribbean because part of the field work was to go to the Caribbean and interview people. Because the course was at Goldsmiths College, University of London, where I did a
Hmm.
master's in contemporary Caribbean cultural history. So it was
Uh, the name alone sounds good.
Yeah, in fact, my tutor at Middlesex University pulled me aside and said, Barbara, this course is made for you. Go and do this master's at Goldsmiths and you will really love it. And she was right. I mean, she was a fan of Cuba. She always went back to Cuba and did a lot of
Mhm.
research in Cuba. So she knew the affinity and the emotional ties that I had to the Caribbean, and it would be
Yeah.
a perfect course for me. And she was right. So I met some great friends. They were all from different parts of the Caribbean, except two of us who were born here in Britain. And that course was a blast. It was very, very educational, very informative, and it even strengthened my sense of belonging, as a person doing that course.
Just to ask a quick question about the gender balance on that course. Was it more predominantly women or was it a combination?
It was predominantly women. There were three male students on the course, and I think 10 female students on the course.
Hmm.
Why
I'll
did
come
you
back
ask
to that.
that?
Why? Because it's just that idea about where the Black Caribbean male is in the education system. The Black Caribbean female seems to be progressing on, but where's the Black Caribbean male? That was just the interest that I had. Um, but don't worry, we'll talk about that
Okay.
afterwards. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you met all, and there was another common tie that I'm hearing that when you were at in your A levels, you had a woman who took you aside and said, "You're going to get an A, and I'm going to teach you how to get that A," right? And then when you got on to do your degree, there was another woman who came up to you and said, "You know what? I see who you are, and I think this is the next step along your pathway." And then your husband to be, or he said, "You're not going back." There was always someone then
Yes.
helping to point you in a specific direction.
Yes, that's correct. There's like always a champion there.
Yeah.
That's true. And I needed that. I'll be honest with you. Even though I had the drive inside me to go to university, because my parents never went to university, but my sister
Mhm.
did a teaching degree in London, but she went back very early.
Yeah.
So I was kind of on my own in terms of thinking, okay, what do I want to do with my life? But I did need people to tell me that you have the ability, Barbara, you can do this. I needed that sort of reassurance when I was
Mhm.
younger.
Well, it's obvious. If your parents aren't your parents are always the ones who you look at to say when you're young, you look at them to help to direct you where to go, but they can only take you so far as their experience allows. And
Yeah.
then you do need other people to say, well, actually, our experience extends beyond this point. We can help you to get there. So I think it's really important that we find those individuals in our lives to help us. So how did you then end up where you are now in at the University of Kent? What's the story between you finishing your master's program and where did you go in the Caribbean when you were doing your field work? Was the bank manager right that you just wanted a job?
Yes, I went to Trinidad. I went
Okay.
to St. Augustine's campus,
Hmm.
which is the University of the West Indies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and use their library, use their facilities. But the main thing was I was able to interview the ex-president of the Caribbean Federation. And he was the person that kind of was the glue for CARICOM,
Hmm.
getting the different islands to come together.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, that federation broke up, and that was what my thesis was about. Why did the
Hmm.
Caribbean Federation break up?
Hmm.
And that was to do with all colonialism and imperialism and different islands having different views about who they are and their
Hmm.
identity. Yeah, so that was the reason why I had to go to Trinidad, and luckily again, being a small island, my aunties had really great contacts. So that's how I was able to interview that chap. And and that I think was the hook in me applying for my PhD. When they
Hmm.
saw that I had interviewed someone very high up as a
Hmm.
politician, I think that's what kind of got me in. So, but your question was about what did I do in between after I.
Yeah, how did you get from that? So no, but that you've segued into it partly, but so after you completed your masters,
Mm.
did you think? my next step, I do want to go on do a PhD or
No way.
okay.
That wasn't even on the scene, not at
Hmm.
all. I went straight into work. I had enough. I had enough of yeah, studying, and I thought, okay, I need to earn some money now.
Hmm.
So I went into the corporate world
Hmm.
actually. And remember, I said I liked PR, I liked
Yeah.
marketing.
Hmm.
I actually found in the Voice newspaper a very small advertisement. Oh God, I'm showing my age, I know. A very small advertisement to join Equator International, which was a Black firm that was interested in the promotion of Black entrepreneurship, arts, and music. I thought, perfect, I'll do that. So stayed there for a couple of years and really enjoyed it. And again, maintained my sense of belonging because I was around people that looked like me. My
Hmm.
boss was Black from Jamaica and his brother worked there and there were many people from many different of the Caribbean islands that worked there. So that was great. But then I moved on into something far more corporate, which was the Work Foundation. This is all on my LinkedIn page.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
Work Foundation, which is where I went into sales, again, sales and marketing. And I sold training, interpersonal skills training for people in the city. So city firms, like the top six city firms, like Ernst and Young, JP Morgan, um, um, was it Coopers, Price Waterhouse and Coopers, those sorts of
Hmm.
firms. I would go in there and sell training. And then the trainers will come in and do their training for those participants. And
Hmm.
yeah, and
Hmm.
I would do that. So it's, it's all suited and booted and everything. Yeah, yeah. Hardly any Black people have to say in that area of work that I was doing. So so when they saw me come in as the sales executive, they were like, okay, are you the assistant? No, I said, I am the sales executive. So we're going to go through the reasons why you need this training. So
Yeah. How
mm,
did you find that going into those spaces again?
yeah, it was yeah, very interesting in terms of being a Black woman. There was an expectation of me not to be able to be articulate enough to do a presentation and
Hmm.
discuss with the client, what their needs are for their employees.
Hmm.
So that's why they were expecting someone else higher than me, who would obviously be white, to come in and lead that meeting rather than me lead the meeting. So that's what
Yeah.
I meant by they have lower expectations of you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. But okay, but what were your expectations of yourself?
to knock it out of the park and to get that sale. That's why I was there to, not so much to impress them, but to impress
Hmm.
myself, to know that I can achieve it. I can clench that deal with the client, and then go back and say to my team, we've got the sales, you
Yeah.
know. And they would expect me to get the sales because that's Barbara. That's how Barbara works.
So people knew who Barbara was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. But you still haven't told me then how you transitioned from doing that, kind of like the sales and marketing and all of the public relations kind of activities into then coming back and doing your PhD. Was there a trigger? What was that trigger that kind of like said to you, you know what, I'm gonna go back? And how was it for you?
Okay, so whilst I was at the Work Foundation, I
Hmm.
had children. So, and I had three children, three girls.
Yeah.
And so I went on maternity leave three times, but I went
Yeah.
back to the Work Foundation. However, because you have three young children, it became really difficult to commute to London because I live in Kent. It
Hmm.
became, yeah, very expensive to commute to London because the girls were going to nursery. And in those, yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
really expensive to have even two of them at nursery and one
Yeah.
at home. So I had to be practical. So I reduced my hours to a point where you were kind of out of sight and out of mind with the team.
Yeah.
So I felt more disjointed with the team
Hmm.
who were there full time, etc. So I thought to myself, well, what can I do? what career can I go into now that's has the flexibility
Hmm.
and I can still use my qualifications?
Hmm.
Teaching was the answer.
Hmm.
And I said to myself, oh my gosh, I'd never want to go into teaching because my sister went into teaching and she didn't enjoy it too much. But I felt, okay, let's give it a try. So I did this very small evening class just to put my toe in the water. It was called City and Guilds in those
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, I know the ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to find out what teaching was like. And I actually liked it and I did
Hmm.
well. And I said, okay, let's take the plunge. So I did a PGC FE
Hmm.
for further education colleges. Tell you the reason why I did that. So I did that and it went really well at Canterbury Christchurch and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and the rest is history really, in terms of teaching sociology at all levels. The
Hmm.
reason why I decided to teach from further education is because I went to college. So I had an affinity with those from widening participation, as we call it, widening participation groups. So I kind of
Hmm.
understood the untraditional way of getting to university.
Yeah.
So I thought I really enjoy teaching that level.
Yeah. So there was that personal connection with
Mm.
not just the enjoyment of the subject, but also, as I said earlier, where there were people who weren't you you had people who didn't necessarily like your parents didn't know how to direct you to the next stage. You then became that person who was helping other students coming through who may not, so that they
Exactly.
can know how to get to the next stage. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm romanticizing, but it sounds
Yeah, I
again.
mean, you're absolutely right. It was the sorts of conversations I had with students was, look, if I could do it, you could do it. Because this
Hmm.
is what I went through, living in Tottenham on an
Hmm.
estate, blah, de blah. And they said, okay, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I'll give it a try. So I really encouraged them, gave them micro affirmations, where it was relevant. If they weren't doing the work, I would tell them, you really need to buck up and do the work now.
Yeah.
So I was a kind of a teacher that was both fair and relatable and understood where they were coming from.
Hmm. So with them as individuals, not as just numbers or kids that aren't going anywhere.
Yeah,
You
that's
you
right.
found that personal connection with them.
I found personal connections with lots of students. Students would
Mhm.
come up to me after a lesson and say, you know what, Barbara, I've never written more than a page in class. Now look how much I've written today. It's been really interesting. I think that's great. Another one would say to me, you know what, Barbara, you're the first Black teacher I've ever had in my life. And yeah, and and that made a difference to them just engaging.
Yeah. So you were there was there was multiple reasons why you were there, but you still haven't told me your reason for doing the PhD. You're skirting around it. Tell me about it.
Okay, so my husband, yes, Mr. Adewumi again, you have to remember this guy's Nigerian. He's a Yoruba man. They're very, very focused on education. Okay. And he said, look, if you want to be taken seriously in sociology, you need to go to the top. So therefore you need to do a PhD and I will support you to do that. So
Wow.
I thought, wow, three kids. Mm. One still under the age of 5. Okay. Right. All right, let's do the PhD. Let's go for it. So yes.
Wow. So you had this career, you've gone into you deliberately made a career change in order to help to support your well, not support, but to manage
Manage.
balance.
Mm.
Yeah, to balance childcare and activities and just maintaining your educational professional profile. And then you throw into the mix a PhD, right? Confessions. I did a PhD in 3.5 years, had no responsibilities whatsoever. All I had to do was get up out of my bed and go to the lab and do my work. What was your day like? Because you have 3 little ones.
I did. Mine was like a military operation, to be honest with you. Had to be very structured, very organized. For example, I would be writing away a chapter in the middle of the night when everyone's sleeping and it's nice and quiet. And before I know it, the sun is coming up and the girls have to get to school. So I would just quickly dash in the shower, get the girls ready. I've forgotten that I even need to sleep and then drop them to school and then come back and then realize maybe I should get some sleep. Yeah. So I don't know. It was just a sort of an adrenaline that made me so determined to get this PhD completed. And I was also self-funded. I did not
Wow.
have, yeah, I did not have a scholarship. We decided to, yeah, that we could manage to be self-funded,
Yeah,
which also meant that the money's going to run out.
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
So this has to get done.
yeah. So there was several motivating factors,
Yes,
if I can call this financial pressures a motivating factor, but it did motivate you. Yeah.
it
What
did.
did you do your PhD in? What was the subject area surrounding your PhD?
Right. My PhD was on Black middle class professional parents and their aspirations for their children in Britain.
So this, no wonder you did it in 3 years, man. You were talking about yourself.
Oh, I was partly talking about, African parents who come
Yeah.
in, Caribbean parents who were either born here, which is a really
Hmm.
interesting
Hmm.
comparison. Caribbean parents who were born here, or those who came over from the Caribbean and then came to Britain,
Hmm.
completely different yeah, mindset about education.
Yeah.
Those who have been through the education system like me, yes, have some very heavy stories to tell.
Hmm.
And so they ended up having what I call the talk with their children about race in education and actually writing a book about that.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, I'm looking forward to reading that. Yeah. And so what would you say were, because you said that there was differences. So there
Mm.
was differences between those who were almost like socialized here,
Yeah.
those who were socialized in the countries where they were the dominant class, the
Yes,
dominant there was
population. Mm.
population. How did that differ in the outcomes for the children, do you think?
But remember, I didn't interview the children, I just interviewed the parents.
Right, okay.
So it's all about the impact that the parents' strategies have
Hmm.
upon their children's education pathways. So what
Hmm.
do I mean by that? Is that some parents would have the social capital and the economic capital to provide them with extra tuition because they knew that
Hmm.
their children weren't getting the
Hmm.
quality of education that they should receive because of the color of their skin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And they
yeah,
weren't just assuming that. They were having conversations with their children who were saying, why am I being teased? Why am I being bullied? Why is
yeah,
my teacher not listening to me when I respond to a question?
yeah.
So, and then they're having to have that talk with them, sit them down and have that talk. But as well as that, they have created strategies in order to navigate all these systemic barriers in their child's education.
And what support mechanisms did the parents have in developing these strategies? I don't know whether you went into that, or how was it that they were trying to create new pathways for their children?
Some of them would network with other parents
Hmm.
that they would meet at private tuition and, kind of give them advice. Some of them would meet like at the side by the swimming pool, when you're teaching the
Hmm.
children how to swim and you're just sitting down there waiting for another hour to pass and they'll have conversations of, have you tried this? Have you heard about Kumons, for example,
Hmm.
which is another private way of teaching maths and English in a repetitive way. It's
Yeah.
called Kumons. So things like that. So I would say the support mechanisms were that the parents were finding similarities between the difficulties that they were having, saying trying to get their children to do an 11 plus exam and get into a grammar school. And so they would get together and talk about ways that was possible, even though the school wasn't there were some schools in Kent, for example, that weren't interested in the 11 plus and weren't not pushing children to do the 11 plus, where there were others that were very keen on them doing the 11 plus and getting into grammar school.
Hmm.
So they would talk, they would just talk to each other and get to know the unknowns.
So they were demystifying the pathway to provide some alternative or some alternative route which wasn't being provided by
Yeah.
the system which they found themselves in.
That's correct. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna have to have a look at when's your book coming out? When are you listen, you did your PhD in 3.5 years, so I'm expecting this done or it's already
Oh
done.
no. Oh no, I'm doing many other things now besides the book. I don't want to put a date when it's coming out,
I
but
think you should.
I've only
I
just
think
started. Let's just
it's
say
all right,
just
it
start.
doesn't
Give
matter.
me a
That's
chance.
but what was your PhD experience like then in terms of it sounds from the topic area, from the title, it sounds like it was fascinating. But did you have that level of support, etc.? Did people who were your supervisors and things like that, did you have mentors or people who you could turn to support you through that journey?
I'll be honest with you. My supervisors did what they had to do.
Hmm.
They didn't have the knowledge that I had about the parents, the black middle class parents. In fact,
Hmm.
they asked questions like, "Are you sure there are enough black middle class parents in Britain for you to interview?" Mm, yes.
There's a
Um,
mic drop that's just happened, but carry on.
so my mentors were outside of the university. Yes, I even had one in America who I would
Hmm.
who I would call and just have a really good pep talk with him. And he would say, look, you have the tenacity, the determination, Barbara, you can do this. And that's what I needed. And I wasn't really getting that from my supervisors. I was getting the clean cut, all right, this is how you should structure it. This is missing. You need to add this. This will help improve that chapter. That's what I was getting. I really didn't have that, the sorts of relationships that some students have with their supervisors.
Hmm. It's so interesting. And what I'm going to say is that the narrative which you were uncovering for your parents, middle class parents, trying to get their children to navigate the education system, it was almost as though it was being paralleled in the fact that you had to be going externally to navigate the
Mhm.
PhD process so that you could get through that process yourself.
Yes. I've actually not thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. Yeah. I
Yeah,
had to find a way. Yeah, I had
yeah.
to find a way. Mm.
I'm amazed. I really am amazed. So what is it that you're doing now?
Wow. Okay. Well, now I'm a senior research fellow
Hmm.
in student success,
Hmm.
but I'm also based in the Center for Study in Higher Education. And let's start from the top. So I supervise PhD students, which is great. Yes,
Yeah,
I have two at the moment who are both black, in fact, black female students. Um, I also look at the reasons behind the awarding gap, particularly the black-white awarding gap, and what are at the moment they're calling it the unexplained. What are the unexplained reasons? I believe it should be called what are the unresolved reasons of
yeah,
the awarding gap? Because we know what the reasons are.
yeah,
We've got tons of reports on it and
yeah.
recommendations, but it's just not being resolved. Yes,
Yeah.
so I look at that. I'm also co-chair of the BAME Staff Network, which is very well known in the institution, where we make the executive group accountable for anti-racism strategies, the Race Equality Charter, which we just got the Bronze Award for last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Um, the other four co-chairs that I work with, we've done research in the area of bullying, harassment, racism. What is it like to work at Kent? So So we do, yeah, so we're very, very active and we have very active members in there. And that also creates a sense of belonging for
Hmm.
staff of colour, yeah, at the University of Kent. I also try and work closely with students, even though I don't teach, I'm
Hmm.
100% research. The way I do that is that I hire research interns to work with me on my research projects,
Yeah.
which looks mainly at institutional racism, ways that we can improve our services to students from widening participation groups. Um, I've also completed a longitudinal piece of research looking at students who come in right through to their graduation. And these particular students that we've looked at have really high grades. So they get a scholarship when they come in, known as the
Hmm.
Academic Excellence Scholarship. So you have a range of students, white, Asian, African, Caribbean, whatever. They come in with really high grades, be it BTEC or A level or a mixture. And and then along the way, there was COVID. We didn't know COVID was going to happen. So how did that impact their student journey, their experience being
Yeah.
at Kent, for example? And also a few of them lost their scholarship along the way. Why? And then those who graduated with a 2-1, 2-2, or a first, how were they able to achieve those grades? And why didn't they do better for those
Yeah.
who got a 2-2 and expected to get a first example? So
Yeah.
it's been really interesting doing that longitudinal piece of research.
Has that been published as yet?
No, it hasn't been published as yet.
Okay.
We started to present at conferences
Hmm.
like the British Sociological Association, the BSA,
Hmm.
the Society of Research in Higher Education,
Hmm.
SRHE.
Hmm.
So we're still going through analysis. There's heaps and heaps of qualitative data.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have over 150 hours of transcript. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they were doing 2 interviews a year plus 2 surveys
Yeah.
a year across 3 years. Yeah, and it's been fascinating. So,
Yeah.
but so you'll hear more. I mean, we intend
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
a lot more publication. We intend to do publications, a few articles on things, and produce a book at some point.
Listen, I'm hearing books coming out left, right, and center. I Now I was looking back, Barbara, and I know the first time that we met, right? And
Mm.
I think the first time I remember it was when well, Imperial was doing the BME Early Careers Conference, and it was just at the time when COVID was happening, and so I
Mm.
was retracing some emails,
Okay.
and I got an email from you because it was at the time when COVID happened and we were about to start. We had to cancel the in-person event, and we had sent a message, and you sent back and said, "Oh, thank you for keeping us informed of all of the activities that we're doing. Just let us know when the next one is going to take place." And I remember reading it and I think, oh, that's lovely that someone would appreciate that we're keeping everyone in touch throughout that period, because it was such a scary period at the time. And then more recently, or the year later, is when you actually contributed towards the Black PhD experience, and a beautiful chapter that you wrote for that, outlining your experiences. So, you know, we've been on a journey. It's been a journey that we've been on, you know. Um, I'm going to ask my final two questions just because I'm wary of what the time is. I'm going to ask the question of thinking about that journey you've been on. What advice would you have given to your younger self? And the kind of like opposite end of that question is, what do you think your younger self would look at you now and say, wow?
Okay. What advice I would give my younger self is to never doubt yourself
Hmm.
and never doubt who you represent,
Hmm.
in terms of your heritage and in terms of your resilience and ability to persevere in a country that that so many things are built against you because it's not built for you, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, don't doubt yourself. Just yeah, keep trying and you will achieve. Mm.
Mm, brilliant. And what do you think they would say to you?
I think they would use that three-letter word, wow. You know, how have you been able to achieve so much? Um, because once you have children, people say that's it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But once I had children, it was as if my career excelled,
That's right.
which it has. So it's like how it would be, how did you manage to do all that? And it's amazing that you've been able to hold it all together,
Hmm.
and also produce such wonderful girls who have very high aspirations for themselves.
I was just, I'd say, I know it was my final two questions, but then when you pulled your girls in, I thought to myself, so tell us, what have you, what example do you think that your girls would turn around and say? What would they say about mummy?
They'll say, Mommy studies too hard, Mommy works too hard. Mommy's always working. And she's a good cook too. Yeah,
But
they have
how have they gone? You said that they're aspirational themselves. So what are they doing, if you don't mind me asking?
no problem at all. Well, all three girls went to university.
Hmm.
Um, the first one has now finished. She's completed her solicitor's exams. She did her first degree in law and philosophy at Liverpool. So now she's looking for a training contract. So
Hmm.
anyone out there
Hmm.
who knows, let me know. That'd be great. The second one is at Birmingham University, and she is doing her biochemistry degree, and she's at the master's stage of that degree now.
Hmm.
And she's actually looking to do a PhD.
Fantastic.
Yeah, she's looking into that. So I'm of course encouraging her. I showed her the book. I said, read the book.
Absolutely.
Yes, so that's the second one. And the third one, she's wants to be a barrister, and
Hmm.
she's at the University of East Anglia in her third year of her law degree.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Well done. Well
Well,
done.
people say well done to me, but I'm not doing all the hard work. They are.
No, but you know what? I hear what you're saying, but they what was it? Mum works too hard, but they're working hard. Mum has aspirations, but they have aspirations, right? Mum achieved her PhD. One of your daughters is saying, I want to go on and do a PhD. It wasn't because they were sat around doing nothing. They're gleaning from what mummy did, and they're leading. You were leading them where they didn't even know where they were following to. So I'm really, that's amazing. Really well done. Okay. Barbara, you've been a fantastic guest, right? And I know we'll be in contact a lot more anyhow. But I just want to say a really big thank you for being our special guest on Belonging this week.
It's been a
All right.
pleasure. Thank you so much, Wayne.
I'm going to just let people know what we're doing next week. So next week we're going to have um I'm hoping you can see that. We're going to have Gamil Yafra, and he is the founder of the Diversity Marketplace, author. He's a TED speaker, coach, and a global DE&I expert. So anything you want to know about how we get people working together better from a diverse background, he's your man. And if you have missed any of the previous episodes, please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging dash IAO. And it's just, I say this every week, it's just a pleasure to have been able to hear these stories and to gain and understand individuals' sense of identity and belonging through what they've done and through what other people have helped them to see what their values are. So until next week, I just want to say a big thank you. Have a good weekend, and we will see you again next week. Thank you.